Just saying, there's a couple of seats right up front here. Don't make us feel awkward. All right, can I have your attention, please? If you're out there grabbing beer, wrap it up. If you're chit-chatting, please calm it down. Welcome. By a show of hands, first-timers to the Innovation Center. Awesome. Also by a show of hands, who here works at Liazon? Even better. Can we clap it up for Liazon? You know, Ashok has been on our target list for Startup Grind for quite some time, and we're very appreciative of him and his wife making the trip to Buffalo to do this with us. And when I emailed a good friend, Scott Michaels, and told him that we locked down Ashok, he ecstatically replied and said, "Give me a free coupon ticket so I can send it to my staff." And without question, within a half hour of us sharing that, there were literally upwards of 40 people that signed up. So Liazon is a huge supporter of this event tonight, and I can't thank you enough for being here. So thank you, Liazon. It appears as if everybody is enjoying the food and drink, and I'm proud to say that it's all local. So beer from Big Ditch and Flying Bison, both amazing startups here in Buffalo, as well as Allentown Pizza, the go-to neighborhood pizza spot. And all of that was made possible by the Martin Group, who is also a sponsor tonight. So thank you for that. So my co-director, David, is out of town. Just got a job with Blue Wolf, who is also a new company here in Buffalo, an IBM-owned company, just relocated to Dig, which is really great. They continue to hire. It's perfect, and he is excused from his absence tonight just for that. So if you haven't been to Startup Grind before, I'm going to run through this really quickly, and then we're going to dive right in. I've got a lot of prying questions for Ashok here that I'm sure he is very excited to answer. So, Startup Grind. What is Startup Grind? It's a Silicon Valley-based organization that educates and mentors entrepreneurs through monthly business events and speaking series in cities across the globe. Buffalo joined no more than 2 years ago, and we are one of 200 cities in 85 countries worldwide to host Startup Grind. We have been doing this every month for upwards of 2 years, and David and myself just took over as co-directors, and it has been nothing but a pleasant experience, and thank you for all of your support. I have a really great volunteer-based team. All of their names are here. I struggled with some of them, so I'm not going to read them independently. But for those of you that did help me out, my team tonight, Startup Grind Buffalo, thank you. Our sponsors, the Dig at the Innovation Center. On every single chair tonight is a Dig for a Day Pass. If you have never co-worked before or are simply trying to get out of the house, out of the coffee shop, start a business, meet some cool people, Dig is where you want to be. So your first day is on me. And the instructions are right on your day pass. The medical campus, Dig would not be possible without the BNMC. Nickel City Graphics will be filming and producing a video of tonight's event. Thank you. The Innovation Center is the building that we're in. Martin Davidson Public Relations helped us out with both the food, the beverage, among other things, including promotion. So without them, wouldn't have reached a lot of you. So thank you very much to the Martin Group. Past speakers, our last month, in fact, I wanted you all to know that this is the second biggest Startup Grind that we've done to date. So something to be proud of. The first biggest was Bill Maggio last month, but every single person in the 43 North organization was almost forced to come, so that helped by a lot. So Ashok, I think without forcing people to come, I think we won. Just up there, some other previous speakers and Startup Grind guests, a lot all local or mostly local, I'm sorry, and all phones off, please. I'm just kidding. So, with that, I would like to introduce Ashok. So, a lot of you that read the brief about Ashok on the website, but I'd like to read it again because it's so impressive. Ashok co-founded Liazon in 2007 to address the significant challenges and inefficiencies he saw in the healthcare and insurance industries. As co-founder and CEO, he helped grow Liazon to become the operator of the nation's leading online employee benefits marketplace, also known as Private Benefits Exchange. To fuel Liazon's growth, the company raised over $30 million from top-tier venture capital firms, such as Bain Capital Ventures, Bessemer, did I say that right? Awesome. Bessemer Venture Partners, and Fidelity Biosciences, and developed innovative partnerships with nearly every leading insurance carrier and insurance broker consultant. In 2013, in November 2013, Liazon was acquired by Towers Watson, now Willis Towers Watson, for $215 million. He remains a supporter of growth and entrepreneurship in Western New York, having served as a judge for Bright Buffalo Niagara and 43 North, and as an investor advisor for ACV Auctions, who is right here in the building, Clearview Social, also right here in the building, and Loupe, who is kind of right here in the building, also on Main Street, not too far away. Ashok is often sought out for his expert commentary in healthcare and employee benefits. He has been quoted in many publications, including the New York Times, Fast Company, the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones, Employee Benefit News, and CFO Magazine. Most importantly, Ashok is a Buffalo guy that decided to keep his company in Buffalo, and we are thankful for that. I know that there are a lot of Liazon people in the house tonight. Perhaps you know Ashok, perhaps you have not met him, but it does really mean a lot to all of us here that you decided to keep everything in Buffalo. And with that, I introduce to you Ashok. So, before I hit you with the rapid fire, have you anything to say?
How long do we have? No, so first of all, let me get some thank yous out of the way. The most important thank you, my wife Larissa, who's over there taking pictures, and I have achieved my objective of embarrassing her for the entirety of the evening by pointing her out. One thing I hope we can talk about today is how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur and manage all of that with a young family. It's something that requires partnership, it requires a lot of give and take, and I'm frankly, as proud as I am about Liazon, I'm more proud of kind of the family that we've been able to build together and my two little kids. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that, because I love bragging about that. But so first thank you to Larissa. Second thank you, my comrades from Liazon. You certainly had better things to do tonight, I am sure, than be here. So thanks for coming here. And obviously the fact that you're here for free pizza and beer indicates that we're running low in the snack closet back at home base. Sean, to you and the team at Startup Grind, I'm very impressed. I'm impressed by the turnout. I'm impressed by what you've been able to put together. And frankly, to have 100 people here and only 30 or 40 of them here for free, you guys are doing better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. So well done. Once again, appreciate being here, and fire away.
All right, are we ready out there? Yeah. Oh, come on. Are we ready out there? Yeah. All right. All right, Ashok, right off the bat, I'm going to hit you with a couple of quick ones. We're going to get loose, and then we're going to get deep. All right? Okay, when you're in New York City, what Buffalo restaurant do you miss the most?
Boy, lots. I'd say EV2, upscale, sort of, Left Bank, love Left Bank. More kind of run-of-the-mill brunch, I definitely miss Panos.
Are you a Bills fan?
Is water wet?
Favorite player? Past or present?
I'm going to give you one for two eras. So for the era when I was growing up, which is the greatest greatest era of Buffalo Bills football. Kent Hall, the underrated cog of the K gun, may he rest in peace. For the era of the drought, how could it be anyone else other than Fred Jackson?
Great
Thank you.
answer. Great answer. All right, what, you know, in your downtime, what's your favorite TV show to binge?
So we have a tradition, it's a little dated, but we have a tradition of every Wednesday watching Law and Order SVU. So the shows are getting really, really bad, but we still watch that. We love the Law and Order series. More recently, I have a little bit of free time, and I've been binge watching a couple HBO series. I love Ballers, and I love Silicon Valley.
Did you play any sports growing up?
I know it doesn't look like it, but played some tennis, played some baseball, ran track. I heard our old alma mater doesn't have a track anymore. Makes me, shed a couple tears.
The next one is actually from the board over here that I remembered it was stood out to me, but when you wake up in the morning, what's the first app that you open on your phone?
That I'm willing to talk about in public. So boring as it is, probably CBS Sports. And one of the things that CBS Sports does is they do a really nice job curating all the Twitter sort of things that people are nonsensically saying out there about, you know, our beloved team. So that's my way of getting up to speed real quick.
Wow. All right, now we're gonna jump into questions about him returning to Buffalo. Questions about just throw it out there. How does it feel to be back? You know, here doing startup grind.
Growing up as a kid in Buffalo, you know Buffalo for what it is, which is a really great place to be a kid. It's a great place to be an adult too, but you don't realize until you go away, which for me was college, that Buffalo and places like Buffalo, it's not unique, but other, Rust Belt type towns, have a stigma. So I remember, my freshman year at a nondescript university in New Jersey, where, I'd say, where are you from? And you're like, Buffalo. And they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. I was like, well, what do you mean you're sorry? Like, Buffalo's a great place. And then, by the time I got like the fourth one of those, I said, okay, something's going on here. That was obviously the start of kind of a multi-year process. I was away from Buffalo for quite a while until I moved back in 2005. But there certainly seemed to be this incredible gap between what we know Buffalo to be and what the world thinks of Buffalo. And I think it's important for us to take stock of that, but to also do something about it whenever you can.
So what would you say are some of the largest struggles growing a company? You know, what are the biggest struggles one would run into while trying to grow or build a company in Buffalo?
So I think it's really two big ones. The first is amongst tier one investors, if I can use that phrase, there's a belief that it's going to be really hard to recruit good people in Buffalo. And the vast majority of the investments of top tier venture capital firms are either in New York or San Francisco. So issue number one is trying to convince people that, you know, we're collectively not a bunch of, you know, podunks, right? I think the second issue, you know, once you get past that, the second issue is there's then a belief that, okay, maybe you can get the first 6 people, maybe you can get the first 10 people, maybe you can get the first 20 people, but can you really scale a company? Can you really build a company of, you know, tens of people, hundreds of people? And so notice the common thread between both of those, it's people. And ultimately, all venture capitalists and other investors think about is, can you attract good people to execute an idea? The idea already has to be good to even be in that conversation. And so the key part of any conversation there is convincing folks that you actually can build and retain and nurture a really, really good team.
Wow. That is a little off the beaten path. Considering you were this, thank you again. If you had, with your young family, if you had a wide open Saturday in Buffalo, New York, how would you spend that Saturday?
That is sort of the validation that another company or the public, we just, and so is it a business that can scale? And what that means, the word scale is thrown around a lot. I'm not sure people really understand it and sometimes what it means. What scaling really means, in short, is that for every new customer you bring on, the marginal profit of that next customer is better than the marginal profit of the last customer. In other words, your initial upfront product investments and marketing investments and infrastructure are getting increasingly leveraged in the form of better contribution margins from each client. There are business plans that struggle with that, and that's a super important sort of thing. And then the third is kind of what we talked about. It's relationships, it's team, and frankly, to be very blunt, it's the CEO. You know, like quarterbacks and, you know, other sorts of, you know, things, CEOs get too much credit when things go well and probably too much blame when things don't go well. But ultimately, as an investor, you don't have the ability to manage at the level in your investments of people that are being hired, customer decisions, operational decisions. Really, the only operational decision that you have oversight over is the CEO. And so, is that CEO somebody who can take the business, not necessarily to be the next Nike, but can take it a couple levels? That's sort of the third criteria. Those three are the big ones.
Now, you used a very important term in there, and you used the word team. So my next question is, when you know, who are the type of people that you surround yourself with when you're building your ideal team? You know, how do you identify talented people that you want to work alongside?
Yeah, so I would say a couple things. So first is, so there's a book that I read recently and then my wife read recently. It's by Ben Horowitz, who's a venture capitalist on the West Coast. I think the book's called Hard Thing About Hard Things. He was CEO before co-founding Andreessen Horowitz. So he writes a lot of things in a very colorful way in his book. But one of the things he says, which I thought was very astute, is when you're hiring a team, to focus on strength as opposed to lack of weakness. It's a really important distinction. So a lot of folks kind of in the hiring process, let's say you're hiring a head of sales, you'll look for things like, you know, does he get along with everybody? Does he manage a team well? Does he, or she, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But what you often find is by going through that kind of process, you're basically looking for the avoidance of negatives as opposed to, is this a person who can really take you to the promised land on an important dimension? And in building a team, I personally would much rather have 3 or 4 stars who are really good at very distinctive things as opposed to folks who are, you know, okay at some things but are not bad at most things. So really hiring for a distinctive competency on at least one thing. That I think is important, hiring for strength, not lack of weakness. And then I think the second thing, which again, we had some experiences at Liazon, which folks I'm sure who are here will remember, is integrity and cultural fit are huge. So we had a couple of very competent people, so competent that on their way out, I said, I will be happy to give you a reference. I will be happy to help you land in the right place, but you're not working out here. You're not working out here because you don't fit with the culture and with the integrity and the level of trust and the client-centric nature of how we want to run our organization. So we had to move on from some folks. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but they were wrong for us.
All right, going to shift gears a little bit. Ready for that?
Ready when you are.
Okay. All right. Are there any, and I know you're not talking about this briefly, but are there any startups in Buffalo that you're kind of keeping your eye on, or anything in the hopper that you might say, keep an eye on those guys and gals? What are you seeing from New York?
So I'm not as current as a whole lot of people here, so I want to almost be careful that by excluding anyone, I'm not going to cause offense or anything like that. But so with that backdrop, based on my very limited knowledge, so I was a judge at Bright Buffalo Niagara this past, I guess it was June, and I was impressed with post-process technologies. They didn't win the grand prize, and I know they raised some money recently. But Jeff Mize, the CEO, is very well put together. He tells a good story. The technology, it's not an enterprise or consumer tech company in the way that some of us are up to, but it's a bit of a different business. But he had some good fundamentals there, so I like that company. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. I like ACV. Dan, don't mess it up. My children's college education's riding on it, so no pressure. Yeah, it is. Yep. So I think those are a couple, but look, I think so. First of all, I'm sure there are many more that I'm not aware of, but I think the beauty of Buffalo and people here, whether kids coming out of college, folks working at other companies, the cost of starting a company from a technology perspective is so much lower than it was certainly 15 years ago and 10 years ago. You can virtualize your whole sort of back office infrastructure. It's a lot easier to write code. And then obviously there's advantages from a cost perspective for Buffalo. So I would expect that a lot of the startups to look at over the next 2-3 years are probably ones that no one even knows because they're not that big.
So do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who are really trying to get into tech, have ideas for tech startups? Any general advice?
Yeah, so I think a couple things, right? The first is, while there are notable exceptions, Mark Zuckerberg, most 30-something entrepreneurs are better than 20-something entrepreneurs because, especially again, if consumer apps might be different, but in the enterprise space, relationships and managing a business and a lot of the B2B stuff requires, I think, a level of maturity that you gain on the job. So I think the first part is, for most folks, again, unless you have a killer app that is just dying to get to market, I think work experience is critical. Going out there and, again, Dan, I'm picking on you a lot, but you've learned the ability through your work at Synacor and then seeing a lot of companies that are more effective CTO now than you would have been 10 years ago. You may dispute that, but I'm saying. So I think work experience in the right environment is really important. I think the second is, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. There's a lot of folks. So I don't come from a pure product background. I can't write a line of code if my life depended on it. Fortunately, we have some great people who do that. But I find that a lot of people who sometimes come from that straight engineering background are so focused on perfecting the product to the nth degree that they're not engaging in enough market testing early on. It is never too early to get out in front of customers, to get feedback, to understand some of the things that the market is eventually going to give you in terms of feedback. And whether you choose to take that feedback or not is sort of a different question, but better to have that earlier rather than later.
So if you could go back and change or redo one thing different, what would it be and why?
So I should probably ask, how many founder, entrepreneur keep your hands up and raise your hand if you're working at a company, you're not the founder or whatever, but you're working at a company of less than 50 people. Yeah, that happens. All right. So I'm going to give sort of a broad answer, and then a highly tactical answer. So the broad answer is piggybacking off what I just said. So one of the mistakes we made was and this served us well in some cases, but we went with our gut a lot on some key decisions, and we didn't engage in enough, what's known as A/B testing. So an example of that would be, our first ever client for Liazon. And this is January of 2008. Very rudimentary early product that looks nothing like what it does today by any means. But the first client was a local law firm. And we had a business model that we were going to deliver this technology, and we were also going to operate as an insurance broker who would collect the commissions that the insurance broker would typically collect. And we had all these reasons why that was the right model. One problem, that accounting firm that was happy to do business with us because they were excited about what we were doing, had a long-standing relationship with their insurance broker, and they weren't willing to sever that relationship. So we said, fine, we'll figure out a way to pay us a fee, we'll get around that. We then kind of put that client off to the side and went off and for a couple of years built out the business back on that original thesis of we'll replace the insurance broker. Lo and behold, come 2011, 2012, and I'll save you all the gory detail, we made a big pivot and we started working through insurance brokers. And that really changed the trajectory of the business in a pretty fundamental way. Which broker became our best partner? The broker that we worked with on that first ever deal 4 years ago. So had we not been so stubborn, and had we actually done a little bit of market testing, and had we maybe had a conversation with that broker around, hey, what do you think about doing some kind of partnership and testing something? Think about if we had brought all those clients on years earlier, and think about sort of what that means for revenue and valuation and everything else. So we failed to embrace, I think, the level of sort of discipline around testing different ideas that we probably could have. On a tactical basis, hire a good lawyer, please. So we made a lot of mistakes, and some of them were our fault, and some of them was we got poor legal counsel. I will say, from what I've observed in Buffalo, the quality of venture law has gone up a lot. So I do think there's some really good folks, Dave Colligan and others, who do a good job here that weren't here a decade ago. We ended up getting a terrific lawyer in New York City, and it's been a big deal. But I'll tell you this, right, if I can say one more thing. Not having a good lawyer, and this is a number that I don't think I've ever shared publicly before, not having a good lawyer resulted in a transfer in our purchase price of about $20 to $30 million to investors that they probably, no offense, Dan, shouldn't have otherwise had it not been for some basic deal structuring things that someone who's done 3 venture deals in their life would have picked up. So it's a big deal. Pay the lawyer. It's well worth it.
All right, we're going to shift gears one more time. This is the last section before we kind of take your questions. Also, we had a secret board that we've been manning tonight with questions from public, so we're going to do a couple of those, open it up. This last section is just very unique questions. Let's get to know him as well as we can with the time that we have. So
it's not that exciting, to tell you right up front. Everything I deal with now has to do with pee and poop.
Okay, the first one is, what is the most interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from reading your resume?
So this probably won't be on my resume. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, I'm a big sports fan. And in college, one of my hobbies was I did play-by-play for the sports radio network for my college teams. And so I got to call football and basketball and hockey, and it was a lot of fun.
How did you know all their names?
It's called homework. You study it.
It blows my mind how people know all the names. Okay, if you woke up and you had 2,000 unread emails in your inbox,
Have you worked at Towers Watson?
but you could only read 300 of them, how would you choose which ones to answer?
First, make sure I cleared every one of my wife's emails. Right?
I don't have your email.
I'm trying to get around to pause for that. All right, so that's first. Email is a great topic. There's a lot of stuff you'll find about how to manage email. So I think a couple things, and unfortunately, one of the things that we did not discover in our due diligence when we got sold was that we were entering the twilight zone when it comes to email culture. It is unfortunately, the parent organization is a disaster when it comes to, let's add 47 people on the CC line of emails, and let's have discussions that should be 6-minute phone calls turn into 3-week email threads of 92 nested emails, and someone responds to the one 8 before the last one, and it's all out of whack, right? So, email is a problem. You probably want a simple answer to a simple question. So, what I did to manage email load, because it does get overwhelming, is I would pretty much avoid any email I was CC'd on. If the email was directed to me, if I was in the to line, I would respond. And again, sometimes people slip up and direct it to you and you're in the CC line. If I was in the CC line and there was something kind of calling my name out to make a decision, I'll focus on that. Short of those two things, I'm not going to read the email.
All right, this is an easy one. What inspires you?
I think the art and science of problem solving. So taking a problem in the world, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's social justice, whether it's used cars, taking a problem out there and trying to find a better way to do it. That, I think, has to be at the core of what drives every entrepreneur. Lots of studies have shown that there is no worse way to make a living than being an entrepreneur. It is the absolute worst way to make a living. So now that I've deflated all of you, what has to inspire you, what has to keep you going, is that in some small way, the problems you're solving are going to be part of making the world a little bit better tomorrow than it was yesterday.
Okay, this is the last question that we ask every entrepreneur that we have at Startup Grind here in Buffalo. What do you think Buffalo needs more of?
If I knew the lyrics, I would quote from Kermit the Frog in the Rainbow Connection. But I think I will take what I would say is dreamers. Buffalo, for those of you who've read the history of Buffalo, was built on entrepreneurs in a different era who, that 43 North video from a couple of years ago did a wonderful job of encapsulating that. But over time, we've lost the dream gene, and I feel like we're getting a little bit of it back, which is great to see.
Can we give it up for Ashok for handling all our questions? You get to pick 3 of these questions to answer. Omitted is the app question, which I already asked you. This was no good.
Did you initially consider yourself, or would you consider yourself a disruptor and wearing a Brooks Brothers sweater? What do you think? So that would be a no. One of my pet peeves are people who label themselves. I'm a disruptor, I'm an innovator. Prove it, right? Don't go around calling yourself something, labeling something. If others choose to do that, that's their cross to bear, but I think you're best off trying to hope that your work can speak for itself. What's the hardest challenge that you weren't able to meet? It's a good question. You know, it's funny, we touched on this, but we didn't talk a lot about it. So the Liazon sale literally came out of nowhere. You know, it was an organization that basically decided to make a big play in the space that Liazon was in. They had bought a company before us that was adjacent to what we did. They bought a couple of other companies. They approached us, we were not looking to sell, we didn't want to sell, I didn't want to sell. They put a big number up that got folks' attention, and you know, here we are. And beyond just the money, they also committed, which they lived up to in lots of ways, that they would grow Liazon, they would drive the business, and we talked about some examples of that. So I think the hardest challenge that we weren't able to meet, that we had a good reason that we weren't able to meet it, but you know, I'd like to, you know, I would have loved for Liazon to be a public company in Buffalo. I would have loved to ring the bell at NASDAQ. And so that's going to be one of your opportunities. So hopefully one of you out there can do that, which I wasn't able to do.
What about this one? What's your favorite watering hole in Buffalo? But I understand that you don't drink, so your favorite restaurant, Left Bank, you kind of already talked about.
Yeah, I do well with watering holes in Salt Lake City, but is it your question? Are you giving yourself up? What's my favorite watering hole? So, you know, look, I worry about dating myself because there's so much movement. I don't even know what's out there. But you know, we used to live up, you know, up by Elmwood and Bidwell. So you know, spent some time at Bullfeathers. Some of you who are old like me might remember that horribly painful Bills Cowboys Monday night game where Nick Folk kicked two 53-yard field goals with no time on the clock. And you know, we scored a touchdown every way possible, and we still lost that game. So I remember watching that game up until 1 in the morning there. That was a lot of fun. And you know, less on the watering hole front, but you know, Mulberry is a great place. Whenever I had meetings down, sort of in the Lackawanna, Southtown sort of area, you know, can't go wrong with Mulberry.
All right, we'll do a couple from the audience. Right here, Dan.
So a lot of companies I see have people with ideas, but they're not technical people. They don't, they can't build it themselves, but they're looking for that person. And there's a lot of those people out there. So I guess what your process was in finding technical talent to build that company, and that process you went finding technical build company.
Yeah. So, the honest answer, which isn't that helpful, but maybe makes for folks who are feeling that the pain that Dan talks about, it is really hard for non-technical people to find good technical people, and vice versa, because it's hard to screen, right? It's hard to know if the person's telling you stuff that makes any sense if you really don't know the detail. So the good part of the story is we got really lucky. We hired someone, you know, right out of UB, named Ed Kaczynski. I'd say this if he were here. He's not here. He's not the Unabomber. But you know, Ed had a technical background, a project management background, a business background, and he really did a wonderful job sort of taking a lot of the ideas and turning them into things that could be handed over to engineers. And then over time, oh, by the way, he now runs a whole engineering group. So we got very fortunate with Ed. And honestly, I think as not constructive luck is the answer. Luck is usually probably the answer in a lot of cases, where you just have to keep turning up stones and finding folks. On that front, we went through you know, multiple people kind of at the CTO level, and you know, again, good people in different ways, but just didn't have the depth of knowledge needed to really grow a software company. And so we you know, had to keep kind of rotating folks through, and finally we ended up getting, you know, someone really good. So that's, you know, boss is like kind of funny. But I think long story short is in every part of the business, but in particular in technology, if you're not a technical person, you've just got to keep your eye on the ball to make sure that if things aren't progressing, if deadlines aren't being hit, there's probably a problem there, and you need to move on and find the next person.
Any others out there? Yep. Over there in the white.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you talked about your first customer. How did you actually get that?
Yeah, so if people didn't hear, how'd you get your first customer? So, nothing short of roll up your sleeves, meet a lot of people. So, we met with folks who, we try to meet with, so again, our business is sort of is a B2B enterprise software sale. So we met with people who were influencers to businesses, we met with accountants, we met with lawyers, folks who know the businesses and insurance people. So that was one way. We did some talks, so talked at a Vistage panel, talked to the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. So we did some of that. Obviously had some one-off meetings with folks. But we had our first 3 customers. So one was that accounting firm that I mentioned, who was a sort of a friend of a friend who we got to. The second was a company locally that had 120 people or so, and he was sort of up for renewing his insurance. He was just really frustrated, and he kind of vented to somebody, this insurance thing stinks, is anyone doing anything better? And he said, I heard of this thing. So that turned into customer number 2, and customer number 3 was a friend of mine who had a 30-person fluid power company, and you kind of go from there. But there's no silver bullet. Just got to talk to a lot of people.
Do you believe in cryptocurrency, and are you invested in any?
I've not invested in any, and I don't know enough as to whether to believe in it or not. I'll leave it.
Yeah, so you're talking about how it takes you years to pivot to go from trying to broker insurance to using brokers. What was the hardest part about pivoting after having to say this for years? Was it, did you have to make procedural changes or organizational changes, or what was the biggest thing for you after operating this for years? So we got to completely change this.
Yeah. So again, there's folks in this room who live the pain of having to execute the strategy, but. I vividly remember, the meeting. It was, May of 2012 or something, and I basically said, guys, look, we either do this or we're out of business. And it doesn't mean we're out of business tomorrow, we're out of business in 3 months, but I firmly believe even to this day that had we not made that pivot, we would have been out of business. So the first is you've got to have conviction around it that it may or may not be right. You have to be honest about it, that you don't know, you don't have a crystal ball, but that based on the information and knowledge you have, you've gotten that this is the only way to do it. Because if all oars are not rowing in the same direction, then you're done. You might as well close up shop when you're making a pivot. So first is you need alignment. The second is, to your question, we had to change every part of our business. We changed how we got paid, we changed how we had to bill, we changed how we sold, we changed how we serviced, we changed how we interacted with insurance carriers. And frankly, I would say, while we sold some deals on the new model within the first 3-6 months, it probably took us 3 to 4 years to really work out all of the processes. It was very, very difficult. But again, it was an existential threat.
One follow-up question, I'd say from what really, you're talking about knowledge that you do have to make decisions based off that. So what ultimately drew you to pivoting that? Was it market research or the actual results, or in terms of sales, or what really drove you to that?
Yeah, so it was a few things, right? So when we started the company, in sort of 2007 to 2010, let's call that the first era, what we were doing was very new. It was perceived to be very different. In every meeting, you went to someone like, wow, I've never seen something like that before. That's the good news. The bad news is I've never seen something like that before. I don't quite know what to make of it. We're not necessarily buying on day one. So, so the first 3 years was a educate the market and try to build awareness and help you convert a few. We noticed in sort of the 2010, 2011 timeframe, things started to change. And I think the 2 examples are a large insurance broker deployed their own version of our solution, whether it was better, well, it's sort of a different conversation, but they were able to say, hey, we have a solution like this. And the second thing was there were a couple of other entities that were buying companies that didn't have the full set of capabilities we had, but had the building blocks to do that. So we basically looked at the future, and it's a bit of game theory, right? We looked at the future and said, imagine if in 3 years, every insurance carrier and every insurance broker has access to a solution that's good enough to do the kinds of things that we can do, And oh, by the way, we're here saying you've got to fire your insurance broker, et cetera, if you want to get this. And our bet was that the product, as good as it could never be that much better than what was out there to offset the stickiness of being able to work with those other entities. So it was really based on changes in the competitive landscape. We had some pretty good results, and that's why it was a controversial decision at our board, and we had Bain and Bessemer kind of in it at the time. The results were good, but the decision was we've got to, in a sense, sort of look at it as the business that we have as not being the future, and we've got to focus on our future. If not, then we're not going to have business in a couple years.
All right, one more. Leo in the back.
All right, just going back to the basics.
No Sabres, by the way.
All right, thank you.
Our tank is almost as good as the next tank.
There you go, there you go. Thank you. All right, going back to the basics, how you started the company. My question is, how do you develop the idea, or how did you come up with the idea of Liazon? And then secondly, how much work had you done before you landed the first investor?
So, question is how do you come up with the idea and how much work you do before you land the first investor? So, I think most new ventures, not all, but most new ventures are usually, you start with a morsel of an idea that's, within like 70% of the strike zone. And then you meet people who could either be team members, it could be advisors, it could be investors, it could be customers. And as you meet, the idea continually gets refined. It gets closer to that strike zone. So I had worked in healthcare as a consultant for a few years before starting Liazon. I looked at the insurance market as having some opportunities, but by no means was what Liazon turned into, an idea concocted by myself in my head. That would just be utterly, false. So, I was able to bring some ideas together. We had other co-founders who had own experiences. They brought ideas to the table, and then we just went out and talked to lots of people, like we shared earlier. So that's sort of the first part. On the money part, there's sort of two parts of that question. So we raised some small dollars, angel type money, and we put in money on our own off of really just the concept. So we were able to do that, and there's a whole story with our first investor, which I don't need to go into in that time. But the real money, sort of when Sean mentioned, we raised $35 million in venture capital, so that really came in 2011, 2012, and by that point, we had $3 million in revenue. We were tracking well from a margin perspective. We had a long list of customers, so we had some really good results. The funding climate, to be fair, in that period of time is a little bit different than it is now. So I don't think anyone needs to get $3 million in revenue to get institutional money. But I think the way to think about it is typically angels, small institutional dollars in the concept phase. When you have some revenue, you have proof of concept, you have a product, that's when the institutions are going to be more likely to take a look at it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's give it up for Ashok here. I know that there are still beers in the fridge, there's ice water, there's lots of pizza left, please hang out. If you have any questions for me, I'll make myself available. But I know he's going to be hanging out, and please make yourself right at home. Thanks for coming to Start a Grind, and also thank you for coming to the Innovation Center. Enjoy your evenings.